After 16 months, we're back. And I'm not going to lie, this feels extremely uncomfortable because it's been so long. I literally just attempted to record this episode 2 minutes in, just stopped, deleted it. Here we are again. But I'm promising myself with this take, we're not stopping. We're not restarting. We're running with where it takes us because that is what authenticity is all about. That is what this podcast platform has always been for me, is just a real and honest, intimate experience. It doesn't need to be cookie cutter, doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be honest and real, thoughtful and intentional. And that's the way I want to approach this episode today. So please enjoy this process with me as I kind of just recap what the last 16 months looked like at a high level and how this is a moment for me to rebuild this momentum. And even though it's been so long, truly believing that I can kind of just pick up where I left off. So to give all of you context, June of 2022, I stopped the podcast completely and I went all in on short form content. TikTok, IG Reels were on a huge pickup swing for me. And I just got very clear on what was essential in my life. And I just saw so much growth happening there that I just pivoted. And it was the best decision. I haven't had a single regret as to why I did that. And I'll get into kind of more of why I'm recording this episode today. But the last 16 months were just focused on the short form content. And that was truly the best decision I could have made. So to recap some of like the big business things that have happened, and trust me, in this episode, we're going to go biz, personal, we're going to go all over the place. This is me just throwing myself back in the fire, seeing where this episode takes me. It's honestly so uncomfortable right now because it's been so long. And when you're so consistent with something for so long, 2 episodes a week for 2 years straight, plus another podcast that I had ran for 4 years, like it's incredible how when you're so consistent with something, it becomes automatic and you don't even think about it. But when you step away and you get back into it, it can feel uncomforting, which is what I want to talk about today. So we'll get to that. But stepping away from the podcast for the last 16 months, looking at everything from a business lens, I grew my online community over 300,000 people, just massive, explosive growth between TikTok and Instagram. Huge numbers. I think a huge validation that I was seeing was some of these 45-minute podcast solo episodes where I was talking about, 5 ways to better your mental health, 6 things to do that will help your productivity. They would get a couple hundred plays, and I've always tried to stay away from looking at the analytics, but taking that same concept and putting it out on short form and seeing it get 100,000, 200, 300,000, a million views, it was like, wait a second, I need to go to where the attention is. And that was the best decision because we saw a massive growth in social media community across the platforms. From there, I also ended up launching 3 digital products: Master Your Minute video course, which is a 4-day free course to help you maximize your time so you can accomplish more while working less, so you can get back in the driver's seat of your life. These will all be linked up in the show description. Destroy Your Distractions Masterclass, helping you eliminate distractions for good within 60 minutes. And then the Win Your Day Challenge, a 30-day challenge of prioritizing your well-being so that you can mentally, physically, and spiritually feel the best you ever felt. It was incredible to finally package 3 different courses, challenges, products for people to take and run with. And I stand by them. I think they all came out really, really good. And I've seen the feedback from the people that have ran through it. I think at this point, the Master Minute video course, which is a free course, we've had over 1,000 students go through the course, which is just remarkable. From there, because of this explosive growth on social, I had the opportunity to start partnering with brands, which is something that I was so excited about when they started to come in the pipeline. To name a few: Google, RX Bar, Mac Weldon, Native, Zappos, Hanes, and a list of others. This was such a pivotal moment in my own limiting beliefs of like, could I work with some of these bigger brands? And doing it firsthand and having that experience, I learned a lot, and it just poured more gasoline on fire within me to feel like, wow, my work is being acknowledged by the brands that I use on a daily basis or that I know of. And that was really, really important for just giving me the green light that I'm on the right path and I'm doing the right things. Lastly, launched my one-on-one coaching program where I help entrepreneurs with their time management. At this time, I've brought successfully through about 10 clients through the 12-week program. It's a very intimate, hands-on experience. So not something that I'm looking to do, hundreds of people at a time. But it's been really incredible to work through that limiting belief of, is my knowledge going to help others? And I saw that firsthand with my investment in my own coach around June of last year when I was shutting down the podcast. I invested in my first coach. I had someone there to hold me accountable. I had someone that I could pay that was saving me time and energy, and it was well worth the investment. So that was really exciting. Being able to help people directly, and that's still something that I do today, and really curious to kind of see what that evolution will look like in the coming months. Now to flip to some of the personal side. Went through a 2-month breakup with my partner and spent the first half of the year rebuilding our relationship. That was a lot of emotional, physical, spiritual, just so much in that process. And fortunately, we made it through the other side, but just a lot of learnings in that process. And I really feel like I came out the other side, I don't want to say a better man, but just a much better understanding individual of my own self and my past. And I had to do a lot of deep diving into why I am who I am, and through therapy, through just a lot of deep work. It was a lot. It was a lot, but fortunately through it all, we made it out on the other side. Ended up leaving LA after 6+ years and recently moved to Austin, Texas. So now if you're watching visually, this is out of Austin, Texas. No longer am I in LA. Recently surpassed over 450 days of no alcohol. That has been such a game changer for just giving me back so much time, energy, and money to focus on the things that are really important to me, the things that are really adding energy and fuel to my life rather than pulling away. So that's been a big one. And all that to say, really just feel like physically in the best shape of my life. And I'm just embracing this hybrid athlete lifestyle of running and lifting weights and yoga, mentally, physically, and spiritually, I'd say across the board, feeling like I'm in the best place of my life. So a big question is, am I glad that I stopped the show in June of 2022, 16 months ago? Absolutely. There's no question about it. It was absolutely necessary. I saw before my eyes what was happening in the space, this massive opportunity to jump into the short form content and try to crush it. And I did. I saw a lot of growth. So I'm very happy that I got clear on what was it that I need to do, which was slow down on podcasts and go all in on the short form. And yeah, it just was the best decision, and there's no question about it. One thing that I think gave me that green light to take a step back and to slow down from podcasting was I really do understand time management. And that's going to be a big push in these coming episodes, and just this next evolution of me as a podcaster is somehow using time management as the vehicle for everything that I will talk about moving forward. Because I do believe time management is the unlock to any goal, any area of your life. Your life becomes what you prioritize. And we're going to talk about that a lot in the coming episodes. But I just understood that how my time management works. And I was able to get very clear on what was the most important focus at that moment in time, June of 2022, to grow my business. And it was focusing on the short form content. I was seeing the growth, and I knew I needed to go all in. I needed to cut out the distraction of the podcast. And that's exactly what I did. So it was without a doubt the best decision. So the big Q is what's inspiring me. I guess I said that was a big Q. Well, here's another big Q. What's inspiring me to pick back up on the show? I think I'm missing, not I think I know, I am missing the long form content game. And the only way to find out if that's the case is by giving a shot again, by just going for it and seeing what happens. Because there's a much different fulfillment that comes from recording a long form content piece like this, where it's very very real, honest, authentic, raw. I can really dive into the weeds of subjects and topics with all of you. But through the short form, you can't. It's very high level. It's very like these quick dopamine hits, and you're trying to catch people's attention. And it's these clever hooks. This is the place, the space where I can really, truly dive in and try to get into the weeds of certain topics and subjects. So I'm just inspired to kind of get back into it, being in this new city of Austin, looking at these next chapter of my life. I'm going to be 30 in less than 2 months. And the podcast space is what got me to where I am today. And I feel like it's always something that I want to be part of my life. So I'm just kind of just dipping my toes back in the water with no expectation, no scheduling, not like getting back to a regular cadence of every week, every Monday, every Tuesday. I'm just going to trust and go with the flow and see what happens. And I just really want to just go for it. So let it be known that this isn't the first time I've taken a break for a show. I don't know how long you've been listening or tuning in, but for any of the real ones out there that have been following me since day one, my first show, Purpose in the Youth, I ran consistently for 3 years, and then I took a break. And that process taught me a lot. Like taking that first break was so hard for me, but it also was so necessary. And it just showed me that like we have that ability to step away and get back into it when we need to, and more on that to come. But I ran my first show, Purpose in the Youth, for 3 years, consistently took a break. Then I ended up stopping the show, starting this one, It's the Bearded Man. Ran this one consistently for 2 years straight. And then that's when I took the break again for the last 16 months because of the short form content. So what is it that I want to focus on today's conversation? For my first episode back, well, you could probably guess, but I want to focus on the importance of momentum and how momentum can be rebuilt with a simple and small decision. So I like to think of it as the momentum rebuilder framework. I just made this one up as I was prepping for this episode. But this is the process I go through when I'm trying to rebuild momentum in any aspect of my life, whether it's this podcast, wellness routines, whatever it might be. First step, decide on what you want to refocus on. For me, it's restarting up this podcast. 2, it's eliminate any and all resistance that may block you. All that mind chatter of, oh, it's been 16 months. How are you going to get the momentum going again? You lost all the momentum you had going, blah, blah, blah. Or, maybe there's not enough time in my schedule. That's resistance. Well, how do I create time in my schedule is something that I'm going to have to work through and find a way to make it work. So eliminating all resistance is very important. Step 3 is taking that first step to get going. So for me, that first step was just starting to write out the script before I even got to this point of recording this episode. And man, did I feel resistance. I was very tempted to go back to my last episode of episode 199 and look at that script and remember, how did I run the show? What was the outline? And I said, you know what? Scrap all that. Let's start fresh. Let's just trust our gut and let's see what happens. Let's not overthink it and let's just go. And I wrote out that first script for today's episode. I kind of re-edited it a couple of times and I said, there's no better way to figure this out than just by doing and going. So that's where we are today. Next step from there is stay as consistent as possible. I'm not there yet, but once again, going hand in hand with not necessarily for me building in like a schedule, I will find some rhythm and cadence to putting out these episodes. But I know that the only way to rebuild momentum is to stay consistent, and I'll work through that. And then lastly, which I haven't gotten to just yet, have patience as you begin to build back up the momentum with time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to happen in week 1, 2, 3, or 4. The only way we build momentum is through consistency with time. And it's very easy for me to think about, well, had I just kept going these last 60 months, I'd be at X spot with X episodes downloads and this amount of viewers and this amount of guests, blah, blah, blah. Scrap all that. The past is the past. What's done is done. Don't regret it. But here we are, this present day, and we're moving forward, and we're not going to worry about the next 3 weeks, the next 6 months, the next year. I'm just going to focus on one episode at a time, 1 week at a time, if that's the cadence that I come up with, and we'll just go with the flow. Let me paint a picture to help you visualize this even more for regaining momentum in any aspect of your life. That maybe there's something that you've been trying to regain momentum. And this is kind of my mindset, and this thought is kind of what I lean into when I have those moments and I'm trying to regain momentum and I feel like I've lost it all. Making progress is similar to climbing a mountain. Okay. You pick a mountain. It doesn't matter. You want to climb Mount Everest, Mount Bob, Mount You, whatever, just whatever. Pick a mountain. Okay. When you start, you are at the very bottom with so much room for growth. It can be intimidating. You're down at the bottom, you're looking at the peak. Maybe you're geared up, you're ready to roll. You could be excited, you could be nervous, you could be overwhelmed. All the emotions are ripping through you, but you know this is the beginning of this journey. As you begin to ascend, you work your way up the mountain. There's going to be some easy parts, some really difficult parts, some like, what the are we doing parts? And you're just going to work through it. You're going to push through and you're going to keep going. There are going to be days that you just keep going without resistance. And there are going to be days where you just don't want to put on those hiking boots, right? This might not be a climb the mountain in one day. It might take you a few days to get up there. But even when you decide to take a break, you're still further up the mountain than when you were when you started, right? So at any moment in time that you do take a break, you've made progress. You're at a new elevation and you still have more to go, but you're at that new elevation than where you were a couple of hours ago. And just because you stopped and rested doesn't mean you have to go back down to the beginning to start all over again. You're just at that same new elevated spot. And that's where you get to pick up and keep going from, right? This is an example of what I remind myself when I too lose momentum. Oftentimes, we can think that because we lost the momentum, we're actually back at the starting point, but we're not. We're so much further up the mountain than where we were when we started. And even if it was a full day, a full week, a full month, a full year, 16 months in my case, yes, it does feel like I am back to square one, but in reality, I'm at the peak. Not the peak. Take a step back. I'm closer to the peak. I'm farther up the mountain. This is literally episode 200 of the show, but for me, it feels like episode 1 because it's been so long. But I recognize behind me, I have 199 eps of reps on this show alone, which means I'm just picking up where I left off. We're at episode 200, baby. We're out here. Let's go. So that's my thought process on regaining momentum. So picking up this mic again and dusting it off is scary. It really is. It's overwhelming, as you might hear in me recording this episode. And there's that initial resistance that it's been so long. How could I ever imagine to pick back up where I left off? But I'm just going to go for it. It's going to see where it happens. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. What I'm doing. I'm unattached to the fact that I've been out of the game for 60 months, and it weirdly excites me to get back in it because I recognize I needed that break. So let's see where we end up. For me, there are 3 key ingredients to rebuilding momentum with a strong foundation, right? I gave you kind of like my thought process on the rebuilding framework, but there's 3 really important ingredients. 1, dedicating consistent time to doing the thing. 2, keeping an optimistic mindset in front of the brain at all times because your mind wants to go elsewhere and create excuses and unhealthy narratives. So keep a positive, optimistic mindset in the front. And thirdly, only compare yourself to where you are today versus where you were in the past. Doesn't matter the speed in which other people are moving. All that matters is the speed in which you're moving. And it's easy to compare where you are today to where you want to be, but that does nothing for you. Comparing where you are today to where you were can give you that inspiration and that validation that, yes, I am doing this. I am making progress. I am capable. I can do this. So I'm going to keep going. Momentum quotes that fire me up. First one, each morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most. And that's said by Buddha. I love this because it encourages this idea of living your life 24 hours at a time and giving the day ahead everything you've got. Just focusing on that day in front of you. Next one, commitment is the igniter of momentum, said by Peggy Wood. It sure is, right? Commitment is a sign, it's you signing a personal contract to yourself saying that I'm going to do X even if nobody is checking in or holding me accountable. So we have to commit. And thirdly, for any movement to gain momentum, one must start with a small action, said by Adam Braun. Small action is what is important to note. We oftentimes think big picture when in reality, we just need to focus on the small things that we can do today. What are the small action steps that we don't recognize and feel are making a difference, but truly are with time, so long as we're staying consistent? So here's a couple questions to ask yourself when you're trying to rebuild momentum. And these same questions I was asking myself and even just getting that first step to record this podcast today. Number one, why is rebuilding this momentum important to me? We got to get clear on why it's important, because that is going to be the inspiration to keep us going, or to at least get that initial momentum going. We need to understand, why are we doing this in the first place? Number two, how much time would I like to allocate to this daily, weekly, or monthly? I'm not saying you need to, sign yourself to this contract where every day you're doing X amount of hours, or weekly, similar to kind of I'm approaching this podcast where I'm just kind of going with the flow. I'm going to see where it takes me. I think it is important to have some type of framework, some type of guideline of how often are you trying to do the thing. So I'd consider, how much time do you want to allocate to it, daily, weekly, or monthly? From there, third question, what day or days of the week do I want to commit to executing this? So now that you know how much time, it's then asking yourself, when are you going to do this, right? So if we know how long we want to do the thing, we're now going to find the time in our week and lock it in so that nothing gets in the way. Number four, what is the byproduct of me rebuilding the momentum back up? For me with this podcast, it's a big question mark. I'm doing this really for the fulfillment of having another medium to really express myself and to dive deeper into certain subjects and topics that are inspiring me, instead of just this short form content. So for me, it's the byproduct of how can this content help the community out there that is supporting or enjoying the content? And then also, how can me reflecting on these subjects and topics help me become a better learner of them? Question number five, what limiting beliefs are blocking me, right? Being able to know and call out those limiting beliefs that might be stopping you is so incredibly important, because you can fight it back with optimistic or positive thoughts. And that's kind of what I've been going through with this process of even recording this episode, which is still like kind of have the chills on thinking about it, that we're actually recording this right now. And then lastly, what is the first step, right? For me, it's just recording this first episode. I'm not worried about the next 10, 20, or 30. I'm not worried about what's 2024's podcast plan look like and feel like. I'm just recording this first episode and just seeing what happens. There's so much magic and beauty in just going for it and trusting and seeing what happens. There's a great Steve Jobs quote: you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking backwards. And that is so true about my life in the last few years. So many dots connect back to me podcasting, and I just want to see what happens when I get back into it. So my challenge for you, because there's got to be something that you take away from this episode if you made it this far, and I want you to put action to every single episode that you hear of mine. Within the next 24 hours of you hearing this episode, get clear on what that first step is and take action on it. There is something in your life that you've wanted to recreate the momentum with. And maybe there are a few things. Just pick one. Pick the first one that comes to mind that feels important to you, and get clear on what that first action step can be, and make sure it is a small action. Don't think too big. That gets overwhelming. Think about the small step. For me, it was just getting out a piece of paper, pulling up in my notes app, and just starting to write down some initial thoughts that I would like to cover on that first episode back. And here we are. So do that first step. Figure it out. Don't overthink it. Just do it. And just know that the resistance will disappear through action. So get to it. Because as I've gone through this episode, now 25 minutes in, I feel a lot less resistance than I did 23 minutes ago when I was starting this episode. So it's a reminder for me that action actually will slow that inner resistance and make it easier for you to keep going. I did post something to my IG story, see if there's any questions or topics within the world of creating momentum that people had. And I had one unanimous comment say, every time I begin again, the mountain seems higher each time. I get it. But remember, the mountain isn't actually higher. It's lower because you're at a better place than when you had originally started because of your experience, right? So the only reason it may feel higher is because there may have been a few hiccups, a few more breaks than you ever wanted, or whatever reason. But let me remind you, that is okay. You are a human being, not a human doing. And sometimes you need to just step away for a bit and give yourself that space to breathe. So even though it may feel like the mountain is higher and higher, it's actually not. You are much further down. It's not down. You're much further up the mountain than you were when you started. So remind yourself you're actually in a better place and that you too can jump back in whenever you want to. And I hope this episode can be the igniter for you. What topics you want to hear next? Shoot me a DM on IG at Bob-A, B-O, 3 B's, 4 A's, and a Y. And let me know if there's any specific topics you'd like to cover. I have a lot of ideas, but of course, I would love to hear some of your initial feedback. If you are interested in one-on-one coaching, I just wrapped up my fall of 2023 launch, but there is a wait list that you can join. So you apply now, and if I have room, I will squeeze you in. That is bobbyhobert.com/coach. I'll have that linked up in the bio. If you did enjoy this episode, the best thing that you can do to help support the show, screenshot this episode, subscribe. You can post this on your Instagram story and tag me. This is how we slowly get the momentum back going with the show. So any of those that do that, know that it is really, really appreciated. But I just want to thank you for tuning in. It feels really, really good to be behind this mic. And I am just going to approach this chapter of podcasting, the season of life, with just grace and give you guys and gals as much content as I can. But I won't promise it'll be weekly. I'm just going to release episodes when it feels right and I have the right time to do it. So I'm excited to see what comes from just this first episode back, especially being episode 200. Let's go, baby. And from there, we'll just kind of roll and see what happens. So thank you for tuning in. It's the Bearded Man Podcast. We'll see you guys and gals soon enough. Adios.